They said I stole $800, 0 cents, suspended me, treated me like a criminal. My friends doubted me. My job turned cold, but I didn't back down. I didn't crawl away. I fought, and what I uncovered, it changed everything. My name's Jordan, and up until recently, I thought I understood how life worked. You show up, work hard, follow the rules, and people will treat you fairly. But the moment I was accused of a crime I didn't commit, everything I thought I knew came crashing down. It all started on what I assumed would be a normal Thursday afternoon. I was helping close up the store, counting registers, double checking deposit slips, the usual end of day routine. I had a lot on my plate that week. My manager had taken unexpected leave, so I was overseeing the new hires while juggling paperwork, customer complaints, and last minute inventory checks. Honestly, I was just trying to stay afloat. That's when I noticed something off. The final till didn't balance. We were short, not just by a few dollars, but by over $800, 0 cents. At first, I assumed it was a miscount, a mistake. Maybe someone entered the wrong figure or mixed up denominations. I flagged it, intending to look into it the next morning. I even left a note about it in the deposit envelope, but I didn't get the chance to clarify anything. The next day, I was called into the district office and asked to sit down with HR. That's when they hit me with it. Calm voices, polite smiles, but the words they used sliced through me like glass. You've been named in an internal theft investigation. I remember blinking, my brain trying to catch up with what I was hearing. They said the deposit was missing and that all evidence pointed to me. I laughed at first because it felt surreal, like a prank, but they weren't joking. My name was written down on a formal report. And the store surveillance? They said it showed me near the register after hours. That was true. But I was just helping a coworker fix a paper jam, nothing more. In that moment, I felt my stomach drop. My skin turned cold. I tried to explain, but they weren't listening. They'd already made up their minds. I was suspended on the spot, told to return my store keys and leave the premises. As I walked out the doors, it felt like the entire world was watching me, like I was already guilty in their eyes. And the worst part, I hadn't done anything wrong. I was just caught in something I didn't understand yet. But deep down, I knew one thing. I had to prove my innocence because no one else was going to do it for me. After the shock wore off, I found myself sitting alone in my apartment, staring at the walls like they might give me an answer. I kept thinking, this isn't real. They'll figure it out. They'll see it wasn't me. But the days dragged on, and no one called to apologize or asked for my side of the story. That silence was louder than any accusation. It became clear that if I wanted the truth to come out, I'd have to dig it out myself. I didn't have a lawyer. I wasn't rich. I didn't even know where to begin. But I had my mind, my memory, and one thing I couldn't ignore. Something didn't add up. So I started with what I knew. I pulled up my old schedules, shift reports, and emails. I made a timeline of everything that happened in the 2 weeks leading up to the missing deposit. Who worked, who had access to the safe, who stayed late or left early. I remembered that Kyle, a new hire, had swapped shifts at the last minute the night the money went missing. At the time, I thought nothing of it, just a favor between coworkers, but now it felt off. Still, I couldn't accuse anyone without proof. I asked around quietly. I reached out to a few coworkers who still believed in me, asking if they remembered anything strange. One mentioned that Kyle had once joked about knowing how to beat the cameras, but we all laughed it off back then. Another said he'd seen Kyle near the office, claiming he was dropping off cleaning supplies, but that was after we closed, and according to our policy, no one was supposed to be back there alone. I requested access to the surveillance footage. HR was hesitant at first, but I framed it as an attempt to cooperate with their investigation. When I got the files, I watched every second from the last few nights I'd worked. It was hours of grainy video, people walking in and out, restocking shelves, grabbing coats. But then I saw it. Kyle entering the office alone, twice. Both times when he had no reason to be there. And on both nights, the deposits were short. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was a trail, and it was more than I had before. Still, there were moments I doubted myself. What if I was wrong? What if I wanted it to be Kyle so badly that I was seeing patterns that didn't exist? But deep down, I knew what I was seeing wasn't a coincidence. Something was there, and I was getting closer. The closer I got to the truth, the heavier everything felt. It was like carrying a weight no one else could see. But I wasn't just chasing clarity anymore, I was chasing justice. After days of watching footage, matching it to shift logs, and tracking deposit irregularities, the pattern was undeniable. Kyle was the common thread in every suspicious shortfall. He had manipulated his schedule, lingered near the office after hours, and managed to stay just under the radar until now. I gathered everything I had, printed the logs, time-stamped video stills, and a summary showing the mismatched register reports under his ID. I put it all in a folder, neatly labeled. My hands trembled as I sealed it, knowing that what was inside could finally expose the truth or fall apart in front of me. I sat a meeting with HR. I walked into that building like someone stepping into a courtroom, carrying not just evidence, but months of buried frustration, humiliation, and hope. I laid everything out in front of them, piece by piece. They listened this time, no interruptions, just eyes scanning every page, occasionally glancing at me with something between concern and realization. I could tell they hadn't expected this. I'd done their job better than they had. 2 days later, they called Kyle in. I wasn't in the room for that conversation, but I was told he denied everything at first, acted confused, defensive, like he was the one being wronged. But when they showed him the footage and laid out the register logs, he broke. Quiet at first, then stumbling over excuses, said he was desperate, that he had rent due, that he didn't mean to let it go that far, but none of that mattered now. The truth was out. He confessed. I was called in later that same afternoon. My suspension was lifted, my name was cleared, but when they said, "You've been exonerated," I didn't feel like celebrating. I felt numb. Months of anxiety, shame, and self doubt don't just disappear because someone else finally tells the truth. I walked out of that meeting slowly, still waiting to wake up from the nightmare I'd been living in. But the nightmare was over, for real this time. The weight I'd been carrying began to lift, little by little, with every step I took away from that office. I didn't just clear my name, I got my dignity back. After everything was said and done, after Kyle was terminated and my name was cleared, I found myself sitting alone again. Same apartment, same couch, but I wasn't the same person anymore. Something inside me had shifted permanently. I used to think the truth would always speak for itself, that good intentions would protect you, that if you just did your job and treated people fairly, the world would return the favor. But the truth? It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it barely whispers. And if you're not willing to fight for it, really fight, it can be buried beneath lies and silence forever. One of the biggest lessons I learned was how critical it is to pay attention, not just to numbers or procedures, but to people, their patterns, their behavior, the way they talk when they think no one's watching, the way they act when no one expects them to be held accountable. Looking back, there were signs, jokes Kyle made, times he hovered around the register even when it wasn't his job. Subtle things. Nothing that screamed guilty, but things I ignored because I trusted the surface. That was my mistake, and it won't happen again. I also learned how deeply false accusations can cut. It's not just about the job or the paycheck, it's about your name, your sense of self. The way people look at you changes, even if they don't say it out loud. And what's worse is how you start looking at yourself differently too. I questioned who I was, whether I'd done something unintentionally to cause it. I started doubting my memory, my value, my ability to read others. That kind of self doubt is poison, but surviving it? That's power. There's something to be said for resilience, for the ability to rise not because someone else saved you, but because you refused to stay buried. I became sharper, quieter, maybe, more careful, but not afraid. Because once you've been through something like that, you stop caring so much about who likes you and you start caring more about what's right. Most of all, I now understand the importance of justice, not just in courtrooms or policies, but in everyday life, holding people accountable, speaking up, looking deeper, because sometimes the difference between ruining a life and saving one is just someone taking the time to listen, really listen. Life didn't magically fix itself after my name was cleared. There were still pieces to pick up, bridges to rebuild, trust to earn back, not from others, but from myself. I remember waking up the morning after it was all over and feeling empty, not victorious, not joyful, just quiet. Like the storm had passed, but everything around me was still wet and broken. But in that stillness, something else began to grow. Perspective, strength, a kind of grounded confidence that only comes from walking through fire and making it out with your soul intact. I took some time before returning to work. Honestly, I needed space to breathe, to rediscover who I was outside of that store, outside of the accusation. I started writing again just for myself, journaling, processing. It helped more than I expected. I reconnected with old friends who had stood by me when things got ugly, and I distanced myself from the ones who stayed silent when I needed them most. There's clarity in crisis. You find out who truly sees you and who only looks when things are easy. Eventually, I left that job for good, not because I was running from it, but because I was ready for something new. I applied for a role in another company, higher pay, better culture, and I was honest in the interview when they asked why I left my previous position. I told them I fought to clear my name. I stood up for the truth, and they respected that. I got the job. Today, I work with people who actually value integrity, who double check before they judge, who listen. It's a new chapter and it feels earned. If there's one thing I hope people take from this story, it's that you are never powerless, even when it feels like the world has turned against you. You are allowed to fight for yourself. You should, because truth matters. And sometimes standing up for it is the loneliest, hardest thing you'll ever do. But I promise it's worth it. If you've ever been through something similar, I want you to know this: your story isn't over. You can still rise, still rebuild, still reclaim your life. Share your truth. Let it be heard. And if this story gave you hope, don't forget to share it with someone who needs to hear it. We rise higher when we rise together. Have you ever been blamed for something you didn't do? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if this journey hit home, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a reminder. Truth always finds its voice, even when it's whispered.